Ella me dijo que ella misma, she will introduce herself, but she comes from the UK, and we're glad to have you here. Estamos muy contentos de tenerla aquí. Ella se va a presentar, pero es la Global Chief Experience Officer de Ipsos UK y viene a presentarnos un tema muy interesante que es las mejores prácticas. Y dice la frase muy cierta: la experiencia de cliente realmente importa, pero es extremadamente difícil hacerlo bien. Así que recibamos con un aplauso muy grande a Helen Wilson.
Good morning, everyone. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm already going to say thank you so much for listening to me, having sat and listened to the previous presenter, and I'm embarrassed to admit I understood nothing. I am conscious how difficult it must be for you, so I'm sure that some of you speak English very well, some of you less so, but just do a first check. Can you hear me, and am I speaking at the right pace? I'm seeing a nod, but I know that guy, so that's no good. He's going to be friendly and helpful. Okay at the back, can you hear me okay? Thank you for that. So, I am thrilled to be here. It's my first time in Chile. In fact, it's my first time in this part of the world. So if you want to contact me, you can write to me about customer experience. But if you've got any brilliant examples of restaurants and things I should be doing on Saturday, then that's how you contact me. So I'm the Global Chief Experience Officer for Ipsos. It's a great title. It means absolutely nothing. But fundamentally, what I'm charged with doing is ensuring that we as Ipsos deliver a brilliant experience to our clients. That's pretty much the sum of it. In terms of Ipsos itself, I'm sure most of you in the room know who Ipsos are, but fundamentally, we're in about 89 countries throughout the world. In terms of customer experience and mystery shopping, the areas that I'm charged with, then we are in about 43 countries, and specifically we're charged with designing, with implementing, with delivering value from customer experience programs using a whole range of research, advisory, analytic solutions and so forth. So let's forget Ipsos. Me, I've been in the business for about 30 years. I know, you'd never guess. I'm very good at matching my dress to the colour of the stage. I'm very impressed with myself. It was obviously completely planned. I have worked for Ipsos for a number of years. I'm based in the UK, and I'm very lucky to be based in one of the leading customer experience markets in the world. So that's a good place to be based out of. My previous organisation was an organisation called CFI, which is the organisation behind the American Customer Satisfaction Index, which some of you may know. Now, that was an organisation that had a hedge fund off the back of customer satisfaction results. They invested on the back of customer satisfaction results. Sadly, I had no part of that fund. My colleagues who invested in that fund made an awful lot of money. At home, I've got 4 daughters. I've got a dog the size of a horse. So I can talk to you anything about Gen Z, Gen Alpha. I get them. I'm your woman. In terms of best practices, clearly I'm here from Ipsos. For me, best practice is about driving the best understanding of one's customers. And much of that which I'm talking to you about today will be founded in that very principle. We look after thousands of clients across the globe, and of course I can talk to you, share some of the best practices that they put in place, recognise that, of course, customer experience matters. We all know that. I'm speaking to the absolute converted. I could share data left, right and centre in terms of showing you graphs that go in that direction for organisations who have delivered brilliant customer experience. We've got the ACSI fund I talked about here, which shows that the fund, which was developed on the back of strong customer satisfaction results, produced returns far in excess of the S&P fund. You've got one here from Forrester, who looked at a selection of companies over a 5-year period and saw that those who were leaders in the CX space were far outperforming they described as laggards, or those they described as organisations who are failing to deliver best customer experience practices. You can talk to McKinsey, and McKinsey will look at their client base over a period of, say, 2 to 3 years, and they will cite figures of increased revenue by 5 to 10%, decreased costs anywhere between 15 to 25%. As I say, the evidence is in abundance. The fact that we managed to fill a room like this 5 years ago, that simply wouldn't happen. Customer experience is at the boardroom table. So it matters. We do stacks of research. Obviously, you may have seen this chart before, and it's a very simple chart. All it is, it's based on about 12,500 customers throughout LATAM, about 1,800 in Chile. But it simply asks, what are the factors that drive brand choice? You see very simply personal experience. Well, go figure. We're all completely accepting of the fact that our own experience is brand choice. I guess what's remarkable is the extent to which this is so the dominant factor. And it's that factor that when you're an organisation and looking to dictate where your resources need to be, then it's the customer experience that matters. So, it matters. Everybody's doing fantastic things, apparently. Organisations who are getting it right are delivering incredible financial returns. I can pack up and go home. If only that were so. Day in, day out, we still see customer experience, dreadful, dreadful customer experiences. This particular example, it was from the same study. And we talked to customers to better understand across a whole raft of different sectors, a whole raft of different channels, whether they experience positive or negative incidences, whether something good or bad had happened as part of their experiences. Now I've selected, to make a point, the call centre environment for the telco, for the cable TV environment. I've call centres, they unfortunately get a terribly bad rap for providing poor customer experience. But you can see here, half of those we spoke to who had experience of contacting a contact centre about their cable TV, about their telco, had received a poor experience. Half of customers are receiving a poor experience. What's worse is when you talked to those half, about a third of them weren't telling the organisation. The organisation had no opportunity to do something about it. What's worse again, in those situations where they did tell the organisation, in about a third of the cases, the organisation did absolutely zippo about it. The story gets worse. Now, I'm sure in many of your customer experience programs, in many of your Voice of the Customer programs, you're evaluating the likes of effort, the likes of ease of doing business with you. A great metric to look at. One of the things that we're keen to do is to look at not just the effort that a company puts into sorting a situation, but the effort a customer has to put into dealing with a situation. So when something goes wrong, let's be honest, you expect that organisation to act together, to put the effort in and to sort it out. What this slide shows is that actually, if we look over here to the red blocks, in those cases where there were problems, the customers themselves were putting in more effort to fix it than were the companies. Now that's a pretty dreadful scenario. The companies screw up, yet they fail to put in as much effort as the customers who are impacted. And of course, you wouldn't be surprised to see that the resultant impact when you've been screwed over is that you're less likely to use the organisation, is that you're more likely to tell your friends and family negative things about it. It ain't good. So, I'm going to ask you a question. When I looked at this presentation and I was invited to speak, I was terribly honoured to be standing on an international stage. And then I read this article in Forbes that said 91% of people have admitted to daydreaming during a business presentation. 91%. 39% had admitted to falling asleep. So I'm figuring, no matter what, in my 38 minutes or so I've got left, I'm probably only speaking to 9% of you at any one time. But let's give it a go. So I'm going to ask you, I'd like to understand whether in your organisations, whether your customer experience is delivering on your brand promise. So you set out a promise to your customers. You have a vision as to how you're going to deliver. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is, you see, that, excellent. How many of you would rate your own organisations as a 9 or 10 in terms of your organisation's customer experience delivering on your brand promise? 9 or 10? Anybody? Now, I know in Chile, most rating scales go up to 7, so I have no idea whether this means that you don't like 1 to 10 scales. You're actually daydreaming, you're seriously asleep. But are you telling me, is there anybody in this room that's brave enough to put their hand up and say that your organisation is scoring a 10 or a 9? Oh dear. Nobody. You see, when you look at data across the world, and I'll do a chart later on, and you compare scores from different cultures, and you have to look and see whether the score you get from Chile, if it's different to that you get from Japan, is that real difference or is that cultural difference? So you guys are supposed to be the positive ones. You guys are supposed to be the ones who rate right at the top of the scale. And if you're telling me that your organisations are constantly delivering on your brand promises, then we've got some work to do. Back in the UK, I conduct a study around every year amongst the captains of industry. So this is the CEOs, this is the guys, the women, actually not so many women, sadly, who are sitting in the corner office. Just 20% of them regarded their own organisations as consistently delivering a customer experience that matches their brand promise. We really are in a pretty shocking state. So what are we going to do about it? Well, let's take it from the top and take you through some of the things we see our organisations across the world doing to drive great implementation, to deliver great practices. And those, I see some very friendly faces in the audience, some of those who were with me yesterday where we workshopped through an example. And they will have seen these terms before. I guess the important thing is to think about when you are undertaking your customer experience programs, it's about realising why you're doing it. Now this is a very obvious question, but I travel into organisations week in, week out, talking with clients to better understand why they're asking us to do research. And I always ask that question, okay, first of all, I need to understand how does your organisation make money? And you'll be surprised at the number of people who sit in a research briefing or who are stakeholders that are actually unable to articulate how the organisation makes money. And they'll talk to me about their programs and they'll give me their objectives. And I say to them, look, in terms of the return on customer experience investment, what is it you're trying to drive? What's the ROI that you're looking to achieve? And again, that's quite a difficult concept to think about in customer experience terms. But you can think about it in terms of 4 goals. For anything that you're doing in the customer experience space, then frankly, they should be addressing at least one of these 4 goals. They should be retaining more customers. They should be getting your customers to spend more with you more often. They should be about encouraging more of your customers to shout loud to recommend your services. And of course, the final one, all of this should be done in a way that is cost effective and in a way that is delivering high quality services that matches your brand promise. Because only by doing each of these things will you be ensuring that you'll be delivering ROI into your organisation. I love this slide, and some of you have seen this before. We asked a selection of the people who joined me for a workshop to rate their own organisations on a range of different factors in terms of understanding customer needs. You've got the mean scores here. Fabulous, pretty good at understanding customers' needs. What worries me is this figure down here, this 6.3, and basically what that is, it's telling you that there are actually very few organisations here who are able to answer that question in terms of what's the return that you are delivering to your organisation by the customer experience programs, the customer experience initiatives that you have in place. One of the frameworks that we employ across Ipsos, across our clients, is a very simple one, in fact. It's based on 4 elements. It's about ensuring that the organisation is engaged from top to bottom around a customer experience vision. Now, I'm sure if I said to you as CX leaders, what is the customer experience vision of your organisation, I would hope you'd be able to tell me. I would hope it would be sufficiently different from your neighbour sitting next to you to enable you to deliver on it. I question as to whether it's the case that actually people could do that now throughout your organisation. Listening, of course, is still a vital part, ensuring that you have voice of the customer programmes that are delivering the real truth, that are delivering a vision in terms of what you need to be achieving, both strategically and tactically. We all get loads of data back into our organisation. We are swimming with data. The important aspect is this whole activation. What is it you need to be doing in order to take that data, work out what you need to be doing, and deliver on that customer experience? And of course, this embed. Now, I gather that embed is not a term that necessarily translates well here, but fundamentally, that's about that culture, those behaviours, that structure of your organisation that truly is going to enable you to deliver on improved customer centricity day in, day out. Just to take a few of these, and we won't go through this in too much detail, but some kind of questions. And I am going to pull up my English example here because it's very disconcerting looking at a slide of your own stuff that you actually can't understand. But it's the kind of questions you should be asking yourself when you're assessing whether or not your organisation is engaged. Have you defined? I assumed when I said to you that if I asked you, you could tell me what your CX vision was. But have you defined it? Have you got clear goals? Is your organisation aligned around it? I mean, genuinely, could you hand on heart tell me that your organisation, top to bottom, left to right, knows what to deliver? Are you ready to do this? Genuinely, are you ready? I understand that in Chile last year, there was an awful lot of effort going on in regard to customer journey mapping, and I gather that many of you are very sophisticated in that field. But what have you done on the back of it? Have you got a roadmap in place? Are you delivering against that roadmap? So a whole bunch of questions that you need to think about. This readiness is an interesting one, and there's a bunch of questions here that you should be asking yourself when you're assessing whether or not your organisation is genuinely CX ready. And there's some very simple ways you can do that. I mean, one of the most easy ways of going about doing it is by employing a structured evaluation. So you're simply asking your senior management, your middle management, your frontline staff to assess themselves, their organisation, in terms of where they are, where they aspire to be across each of those different pillars we talked about. So, for example, in terms of engage, to assess where you are in regard to your CX governance process. You know, where are you right now? Where do you need to be? At the other end of the scale, in terms of the embedding, where are you in terms of your performance management? So, a lot of things you need to take into account when you're looking at that. There's a lot of things we need to think about in terms of journey mapping. Again, I gather you're all brilliant at journey mapping, and I'd love to hear your stories afterwards and the kind of things you've done. I thought I'd just share with you an example quickly of one of the clients in the UK, Heathrow Airport. Now, I'm sure many of you will have spent time going through Heathrow Airport. There's about 78 million customers in 2017. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to better understand surface access and the challenges that that presented to their customers. Now, just to clarify what surface access is, basically that's how you get to the airport by whatever modes of transport. So bus or train or tube or drive. They have this vision. They have this vision about wanting to deliver the best airport experience in the world. It's a pretty grand vision, isn't it? But for those of you who've flown through Heathrow, you know it's a pretty grand place. So to give passengers the absolute best experience. Now, like any airport, they have massive restrictions. They can't build their way to best. They can't process the way to best. We have a limited amount of space, obviously, given that it's based just outside of London, but there's really very little they can do. But what they do have to do is to make the absolute most out of what they've got. They need to think about those marginal gains. They need to think about those conflicting priorities, those short, easy fixes versus those long-term challenges they've got. Need to bear in mind that a huge amount of the process is out of their control. Now, it's very obvious in regard to Heathrow about the aspects that are controlled by the government, that are controlled by the transport operators. Of course, you too sit in that situation where much of that which you deliver is out of your control. And fundamentally, that old chestnut of ensuring that what you're doing is delivering change on the back. What I like about this one is they didn't pay us very much money. Now, I don't like that much particularly. It was a really small-scale study. It was actually a fairly small-scale sample of business and leisure travellers, and we recruited them before they set out on their journey. We did a very in-depth process of research with these particular customers. We spent in total about 3 hours with these travellers. We did a whole raft of different things, from Skype interviews before they set out, Skype interviews to better understand where they were in the process, what their expectations of the journey were. We did mobile apps to capture videos and photographs of their journey to and from the airport. We met them at check-in to understand their immediate reaction to how they'd reached the airport. We spent time with them airside to better understand what their expectations were in more general terms to make. And so all told, a whole raft of different aspects, which really did capture from start to end huge amounts of video maps. And I guess the point being here that you create these video maps, these interactive maps, they're tricky to do. The thing is that it's very easy to stick them on a shelf. It's very easy not to make the best use of it. And the reason I'm showing you this particular case is because I love the fact that Heathrow, on the back of doing this particular piece of small-scale research, I think it was 30 customers, have made massive change. You can see here, I won't go into detail the kind of things they've done, but one of them is this whole issue with Uber. Now, you know as better than anyone the issue of Uber at airports. Heathrow had exactly the same challenge. They had Uber drivers hustling to get into the airport. They had them sitting outside the perimeter. They had customers frustrated that they couldn't get to their Uber. They were being charged extra because it was taking them so long to get there. It was absolute bloody hell. But what they decided to do was to embrace it. You now go to Heathrow. You know which car park to go to. You know which bays to go to get to your Uber driver. The customer's needs are met. And importantly, that's the point. Because for the customer, they've arrived home from their fabulous holiday, they've arrived home from this beautiful glossy airport, they stand outside and they don't know where the blooming cab is. Well, now they do, and that's all part of the experience that Heathrow need to deliver on. I won't go into the detail, but again, the point being that for when you're doing this kind of journey mapping, you need to think not always about what's the most information I can make change with, but also what's the least amount of information that I can make change with, because sometimes it's about making change fast, it's about the test and learn aspect, and it's about failing as fast as you can. Listen, obviously, it's one of my favourite topics, so I won't spend a huge amount of time going into this one, but let's just share a couple of thoughts here in terms of the kind of things that you should be considering. I guess for me, the most important beyond anything else is about thinking whether your listening platform is fit for purpose. You know, we all, I'm sure in this room, I'd be surprised if anyone doesn't have some form of customer feedback program in place. What are you doing it for? Are you doing it to pay incentives? Are you doing it to box tick? Or is it genuinely fit for purpose? Is it genuinely driving tactical and strategic change within your organisation? And of course, the reality is that any measurement system needs to be part of an ecosystem. It needs to be not just the customer, it needs to be your operational metrics, it needs to be your financial metrics, it needs to be a mystery shopping measure perhaps, but it's about recognising that together those metrics, well, alone those metrics are incredibly powerful, but together when you start linking together, when you start going under in terms of how this data works ensemble, then you start getting incredibly powerful messages about where your organisation is and where it needs to be. You will have seen in that ecosystem, I'm sure, that within the feedback element, we talk about both transactional and relationship. Because we need to think about when customers make decisions, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in their head. Put it very, very simply, when one's deciding which brand to choose to stay with, we can think about it in terms of memories and moments. Memories is almost the sort of the neural network. The memories, the comms you've received, the experiences you've heard about from other people. The moment is what's happening right now. The last 5 minutes before I entered this room, I went in, got a coffee, stood there looking a bit stupid because I couldn't work the Nespresso machine, asked somebody who spoke Spanish, I didn't speak English, and thought, really need a coffee? Went back, and 3 minutes later, somebody appeared with a coffee. Now, I hadn't seen this person see that I was experiencing difficulties, see them go off and get to deliver me a coffee. But what a great moment. And so I had a beautiful little hotel moment where I had a need and my need was met. I went to the bathrooms, looked at the glass door, could see people pulling their knickers up the other side of the glass doors. Not such a good moment. And it's that point of, it's a silly examples, but the reality is our impressions day in, day out, the coffee moment and the pulling your knickers up moment. Now, I'm not suggesting you need programs in place to assess the bathroom windows, but actually you do, because they're part of the promises that you make your customers. Are your bathrooms clean? Are your people delivering the service they should be delivering? And you need different types of programs. You need the relationship programs to better understand those strategic questions. And you need those transactional, you need those in-the-moment programs to better understand specifically around those moments of truth, where you're getting it right, where you're getting it wrong, and importantly, giving you the opportunity to close the loop. When something screws up, have that opportunity to fix it, because boy, if you did, the return is impressive. So we can talk about grandstand implementation plans. We can talk about return on investment, and all those are massively important. But like all good things, often it comes back to the basics. If you're going to drive effective implementation, then you need to get your measurement systems right. This is just a very silly example, but it's an example of the importance of asking the right questions. Now, on the left-hand side, there's a question there, which is, how likely are you to recommend Windows 10 to a friend or colleague? The response is, I need you to understand that people don't have conversations where they randomly recommend operating systems to one another. It's true. I looked after a client called BT Wholesale. BT is the major British telecom provider, and they provide the networks to other major telco companies. And they tried to put a question in there which was, how likely are you to recommend our networks to other providers? Now, funnily enough, they had no choice. There is only one network. Quite why they'd be having conversations with recommend is complete and utter baloney. And it's, again, a silly example, but it's thinking about every question you put out there takes time in your consumer's day. You need to ensure that it's working. This is an example from my 12-year-old daughter. My poor 12-year-old daughter was in hospital, and she was passed a questionnaire. And I love the fact that she took time to correct their language and tell me that it was a very badly worded question. Again, a silly example, but if you have a 12-year-old who's questioning the quality of the questions that they're being presented with, then it ain't a good thing. We also talk about the importance of capturing emotion. Now, emotion is quite difficult to capture within a questionnaire, but it is important to do, and the reason it's important to do, because we see from this research here that if we are to look at the customers who are dissatisfied versus those customers who are functionally satisfied, you're getting the basics right, versus those customers who are emotionally connected with you, then it drives the kind of behaviours you want. You'll see here willingness to stay with you, buy more, to be a promoter, and indeed the classic NPS score. If you compare those scores with those who are emotionally connected versus functionally connected, massive change going on, massive difference going on. One can look at it across the markets. It's a busy chart. I won't ask you to do that now, but obviously that kind of information is there if you'd like to see more. But it simply makes the point that the power of creating an emotional connection with your customer is intense. So it's about asking the right questions. It's about asking the right people too. What I've got here is an example of a response rate, very simple chart. This is a response rate for a Nordics company who operate in the service facility space. They do cleaning, they do security, they do provide reception service and so forth. This is amongst their B2B clients, not wanting to be rude to my client, but about a pretty boring topic. It's online. Who's got time to answer online questions? Yet this is their response rate. you can see year to year they are hitting 80% response rates. And the reason they've been able to do that is because the organisation themselves have done the right things. They have ensured that they are getting commitment from the top. In China, their customers get a letter from the CEO. They're ensuring that they're telling their customers once they've researched them what they're doing on the back of all things you know. But I just wanted to share this because it's such a beautiful example of what can happen if you get it right. And of course, if you get it right in terms of ensuring you're speaking to a robust sample of your customers, then you have a far better understanding of what needs to be done. We speak to about 30 or so of clients who run major customer experience programs across the globe. It covers about 20 odd countries, I think. So a relatively small sample, but very important people. And talk to them about some of the challenges that they encounter when they're driving best practice implementation. Well, to be frank, there are no surprises there. You can see that, frankly, it can go wrong everywhere along the line. You can get the design wrong. You can get the implementation wrong. You can ensure that you're not prioritising. I guess some of these things can be mitigated up front. They can be mitigated up front by getting it right in terms of the design, the engage elements. One of the big things that's important to do, this is a real challenge that many of us are facing in our roles as customer experience leaders, is about sorting out the technology. Now, technology in itself is the enabler, facilitator. The technology matters massively. It's what enables us as organisations to be so much more effective in terms of customer feedback than ever we once were. You know, the dream that we were sold 5 years ago of a feedback system that incorporates your CRM, your feedback, your operational metrics, your soft data, your hard data is finally here and it's reality. But when you're selecting your provider, just a watchword, there are about 400 different variables when we work with organisations to help them decide which platform is right for them. There's about 400 variables we take into account. And that's the kind of thing you should be thinking about in terms of what's right for your organisation. They're all brilliant, but they have to be right for your organisation. And this is just a footprint here in terms of some of the technology platforms that you work with, that we work with, that takes into account those different variables and includes price. But you can see their offerings are very different. And it's just a point to make that they're all very strong, but they need to be strong for your organisation. And it's about how you make that choice and making it right. It's about thinking about what are the users going to use it for. I mentioned mystery shopping, and I mentioned mystery shopping because I think it's sometimes seen as one of the less glamorous parts of customer experience programs. Fundamentally, mystery shopping is about ensuring that your organisation is delivering on your brand promises. It's about allowing you to have eyes and ears on the ground. It's about answering these kind of questions. Fundamentally, if you've got a shopping in place, you need to be ensuring that it is improving your training program, eliminating marketing waste, that it is delivering competitive intelligence. I'll give you just a quick example, doing for time. I might go on from this one. If any of you want to see an example of video mystery shopping, you can get some feedback. But I'm just going to go past that one because I'm... Oh no, let's go with it.
In order to demonstrate the speed and value that technology-enabled mystery shopping solutions can deliver for brands today, Ipsos conducted a micro-shop on behalf of Nike. Ipsos sent shoppers into Nike corporate and key competitor stores in order to gain an objective understanding of the sales and customer experience. Shoppers were instructed to engage with a sales associate and ask for help picking out a pair of athletic shoes. They specifically asked for something new and innovative. At the end of their visit, shoppers filled out a 20-question survey and were asked to record a selfie video summarising their experience. In total, Ipsos designed the survey, deployed shoppers and received completed results back in under 5 days.
I had to get assistance, but Yasin was the one who helped me. He gave me good information on the Nike 270.
Jack was very helpful. He explained quite a bit about the Air Max shoes.
Very helpful, very friendly, and very knowledgeable. Question was, how knowledgeable was he? The guy really knew his stuff, so.
He had good recommendations, or at least quick responses to recommendations, though I wasn't given any reasons as to why he would recommend those.
She was very knowledgeable. I told her I wanted some new innovative shoes.
And he went directly and showed me a shoe that was lightweight and durable.
I had a great experience, was given a great recommendation.
Her knowledge was right on par with what I would expect. She was able to answer all of my questions and give me the help that I need.
And the satisfaction of what these employees or these associates at the Nike outlet do is an amazing, outstanding job. They are phenomenal. When I mean customer service, they are so attentive and they come to you directly and treat you so special and make you feel your self-pride and self-worth.
Now, I would love for customers to describe you as phenomenal, to improve your self-worth. We can go on to that video and you can see examples of competitors where they've done a very different type of experience. The point being, this kind of thing brings it to life. Now, I've been told I can't wander. I've been told that the mic works better if I stand this side. Can you all hear me better if I stop wandering up and down? Is that working? Perfect. Right, final 10 minutes to go. Activate in effect, it's the data analytics bit. It's about making sure you get it right. It's about making sure you put your data to work. It can be the very straightforward things in terms of ensuring your KPIs are truly driving action, or it can be the truly complicated things in terms of genuinely seeing whether that which you're doing is delivering a return on customer experience investment. This is a really simple example. I talked to you before about that effort scale. I talked to you about the importance of pushing customers up such that they were putting less effort into dealing with problems with clients. In this very simple example, we had a case whereby driving down that effort resulted in basically a fantastic financial return. So this is a very simple example, and of course you can get into the far more complicated examples when you start going into the end-to-end. Now, back in the day, when I worked for CFI, I was really proud to say that I worked for the organisation who were behind the creation of the service profit chain. I was very proud to work for the organisation that in 89, 91, had created this chain that basically saw the first time that it was monetized, whereby if you raise employee engagement, you raise customer satisfaction, and you raise the revenue impact on the organisation. Now, this was a groundbreaking piece of work at that time. There were claims of it putting something like $250 million on market capitalization of Sears. The piece was very simple. It was very much around if they took up employee satisfaction by a certain number of points, customer satisfaction by a number of points, it would have an impact. But as I say, the point being that many of you all know, I'm conscious that this is sounding a little bit odd to me, so let me know if it's still working. The point being that this organisation was the absolute leader in their pack 30 years ago. Right now, they're dying. You can be the smartest organisation on the block. That doesn't mean it protects you from your future. Complacency cannot happen. What I want you to be doing is to be asking these kind of questions about the customer experience program in your organisation. We've got a couple of examples here from organisations that we've worked with who've delivered return in terms of revenue, who have made significant savings. Again, I won't go into detail. We haven't got a huge amount of time. My point is that you need to be asking yourself if you can answer these questions about your programs. As I say, we can get very complicated and we can get very sophisticated, and that's great. There's a place for that. One of the things I would say is also to make sure that you're looking at the straightforward stuff too. So this is a particular example of some data that comes through in terms of satisfaction with customers across the world. My point simply here is that right up here, we've got Chile. Far more likely in a market such as this for your customers to be giving scores than we might see in Japan. Now, if one were to simply look at these scores as they stand, one might, for example, if you were charged with a global experience program, put significantly more resource behind this type of market, a market like Japan. But of course, again, I'm racing through this, and if you want to know more detail, I'll be happy to share it with you. But it's making the point that cultural differences as well will drive difference. So, back to that final point of what success looks like, how you drive effective implementation. Embed. You see there the kind of questions that you should be asking yourself. Are your people genuinely clear on the behaviours that they should be delivering at the front line? Are they incentivised in the right way? I think you've answered the question already from the lack of hands that went up at the beginning as to whether your customer experience is genuinely meeting your customers' needs and expectations. Have you determined the organisational change that's needed? All the kind of questions that if you are to effectively implement change on the back of your customer experience programmes, you need to be able to answer. So, change can be huge, change can be small. I wanted to share with you a very small example of a colleague of mine who, I gave this example to some of you before, but a colleague of mine who has, I think, one of the most brilliant jobs on the planet. She is head of customer of Her Majesty's Courts of Justice and Tribunal. So she's the person in the UK who's charged with ensuring that the legal system is customer-centric. Her stakeholders are criminals, their families, the judges, the legal community, and the people who run the courts. What a cool job is that? It's a massive challenge. It's a horribly complex organisation, rule-bound, of course. And just as I got on the plane, she was tweeting about one of the examples that her team have put in place, really, really tiny. But one of the things they were hearing from their customer base is as people are about to go into court, they don't know, they're scared about it, basically. They don't know how much time they've got before they go into court. All they did was to put a clock on the outside that counted down, so people who were about to go and have judgment delivered on them could see how long it was before they went into the courtroom. When I talk about effective implementation, there was a chart there that I flipped through that talked about the importance of a number of different things. It was talking about the importance of focusing on the vital few. It was talking about the importance of effective cascade. And this is one of the things that I find in many cases organisations do as an afterthought. They do incredible pieces of work to determine where change needs to happen. But actually, there is a limited amount of money spent in terms of communicating that to the rest of the organisation. So it's important to think as to what are the mechanisms that you need to be using within your own organisation to cascade that sort of information down through. Whether it's about customer personas that are available for your front line, whether it's about interactive journey maps that people just look at and put in a cupboard, but can use their iPad for interactivity to delve deep into the detail. It's about ensuring that your customers can relate to the change that they need, can feel the change, and can do something about it. This is an example, just a very simple example, of somebody at Virgin Trains who took that to heart.
My name's Kay and I'm part of the pre-boarding team here at Euston. When I worked downstairs on the concourse, we used to get a lot of people asking for platform numbers before the train was ready to board. Elderly people who needed extra time to get down to the train, mums with buggies, people with luggage, and until that train was ready to board, we don't normally give out platform numbers. Occasionally I would take people down and pre-board them, so I went to speak to my boss, Phil Cav, and asked him if it's something that we could do on a permanent basis. He put a lot of trust in me by releasing me from the roster to actually try this. So originally there was myself. I started doing it just on a daily basis, Monday to Friday, and then I introduced one of my colleagues, Mark, to it. So I worked the morning shift and Mark worked the afternoon shift, and we did that for 3 months between us until we got 3 more people on a trial basis to join the roster. Up to December last year, we'd pre-boarded 40,000 people. So we've been doing it for nearly 20 months now, and that number must have nearly doubled.
How does that make you feel?
Oh, it's lovely. It's nice to know how you've affected in a good way somebody's journey, because people don't like the way we board our trains here. They find that the most stressful part of the journey. Because they can't see the trains from the concourse as well, it's quite disorientating for them. So for somebody to come up and offer to board them early, so they don't have to rush, they're not getting pushed and shoved. Mums with buggies know that they can board safely. It's great. I love my job. Virgin's a company that will, if you have an idea, then they will try and back you to run with that idea. They put a lot of trust into you, and they do empower you to create amazing, make people's journeys. You feel you want to upgrade somebody to first class, you have that power to do that.
What I love about that example is it was in the hands of somebody who was working on the platform in a train station, yet she felt she had the responsibility, she had the accountability, she had the power to make the right change, and has had a massive impact. You know, the number of us who've stood on a station with ridiculous number of bags, maybe with children, maybe with elderly parents, but that kind of fear as to how you're going to cope with that boarding, a really small part of the journey, but nonetheless, through the efforts of Kay, she was able to make it better and contribute to the amazing experience that is Virgin Trains. I'm going to end with one final video, which I think is a beautiful example of an organisation getting it right.
Here at Realmente, we're the front runners at developing the new customer service standards to achieve customer satisfaction. Today's customer is not the same as it was 10 years ago. Their expectations or the level of service they're wanting from us is much higher than we've been able to provide in the past.
We can't do this without our frontline staff. People who are interacting with our customers are the ones who can best tell us what customers are saying and also respond to what customers are asking of us.
When the drivers used to interact with me, they were very standoffish and very reserved based on that. Usually when they see me, it's usually an issue. Now when they see me on the floor, they can see I'm approachable. I'm out to give them a praise for their work, which before we never used to do. Now we do praise them, and we praise them daily. The benefits of the new system is now we understand how our customers feel and what they're saying about our service. Customers rate our individual service that they receive on a parcel. So they can go online and rate the driver from 0 to 10, 9 and 10 being a promoter, 7 to 8 being passive, and 0 to 6 being a detractor.
The first time, the customers can express what they want from Australia Post to the MPS system.
Every day I go on the floor, I pick a comment from the previous 24 hours. I do a recognition for the driver of the day for the best comment received. So I gather the contract together and discuss with the driver the comments from the customer, and also receive feedback from the driver on what that driver's doing to delight our customer, which then also helps feed the other drivers on how to obtain a better service.
Something different for us, where before we used to just hear the negative, and that does have its downfalls, but now we get into hear the good stuff, where we are giving good service.
I love Michael. He's amazing. He sits here and has a chat, and you just want someone polite that delivers your goods in good order, and he's happy all the time.
From the results we're already getting, they are slowing down, they are talking to customers, they are developing those relationships, and so yes, the things that we have introduced are helping. We have to change ourselves, our culture, to suit our customers' needs.
Everyone has a different role to play, from the drivers down to the managers.
We're all the heroes here. I can't be the hero on my own. All the contractors, my staff, are the heroes.
I'd like to end on that note. I'm conscious I've gone a couple of minutes over your time, but I wanted to share this example with you because I thought it was a lovely example of an organisation who has taken the right steps in terms of engaging the organisation from top to bottom, have put an effective listening programme in place, have ensured that that listening programme has genuinely driven the right kind of action, and indeed is resulting in these kind of behaviours that day in, the kind of people who previously hadn't seen it as part of their job to meet customers' needs, and now seeing it as something that makes their working lives better and certainly makes their customers' lives better. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm conscious that it is incredibly difficult to hear somebody speaking in a different language about a topic like this. It's such a far-reaching discussion. But as I say, thank you very much indeed for your patience. And if there's anything I can help with afterwards, if you've got any brilliant chili recommendations, let me know.
Thank you very much, Helen.
Thank you, you're welcome.
And now we're going to have 5 minutes of questions.
Yeah, or I can do questions in the
Sí,
coffee,
sí, sí.
if that would be better.
Yeah, that could be okay.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of time, if people prefer
Sí.
to ask questions in the coffee area.
¿Prefieren hacer las preguntas ahora?
Yeah?
Sí.
Then I don't
Bueno,
take your
es-
time. You choose.
Sí, sí, es que también si las hacemos acá podemos compartir esa respuesta también todos, ¿cierto? Están muy interesados. They're very interested in your presentation, so we're going to do it now.
I love happy smiling faces in the front row.
Entonces, ¿alguien tiene alguna pregunta? Tenemos aquí 2 micrófonos disponibles. Por allá.
Hay varias. ¿Se escucha? Ya. Hay varias técnicas. O lo hago en inglés.
Okay.
O lo hago en
Otherwise.
inglés. Maybe I can do it in English, so you can. Okay. So
I'm deaf in one
there's
ear,
a-
so I'm finding it really difficult with those things, so thank you.
So in terms of measuring the voice of the customers, there's a lot of techniques that regarding their perceptions. But what are the techniques you're using to understand their expectations, so that you can really measure like the difference between the
Yeah.
expectations of the client?
It's a really interesting question. It's a real challenge. And to your point, one needs to take into account, particularly bearing in mind that expectations are changing. This whole concept of our expectations being our expectations being formed, as said, a lot of that which we're doing is very much in-depth type research, as there is some which we can ask in terms of quantified, but the kind of example where I gave you in regard to Heathrow Airport, it was people genuinely getting to know the customers, spending time with them, exploring deep down in terms of trying to understand what their expectations were of the journey, and only then once we had a framework of their expectations could we assess how, in this case, Heathrow measured up against them. So it's the kind of thing that can be assessed quantitatively, but often we're needing to do the sort of ethnographic type research, as it were, to truly get under the skin of not even just what their expectations are, but how are they formed and how are they changing over the course of the journey as it's influenced by various different aspects.
Can you recommend a book or something that we can read about that?
Let me have a think. Can I take your name and then I can come back to you on that in terms of expectations?
Thank you.
There's a paper that you might find interesting, which is around changing expectations. So perhaps if you could give one of my colleagues your details and I could send that to you, because I think you might find that useful in terms of expectations.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
¿Cuál es tu nombre, perdona?
Victoria Martínez. es
Victoria Martínez, sí. That's her name, Victoria.
What's the name, Victoria?
Victoria.
Thank you, Victoria.
Anybody else? ¿Alguien más? Por aquí.
Helen, can you give us some tips about how we can transform the insight in actions? It's very difficult because
it's hugely difficult.
In general, are things subjective. So for us is really hard.
Yeah. And it is hard. It absolutely isn't easy. And some of it's about going back to the basics. So as a starting point for any piece of research, then I would want there to be an activation workshop. I would want to have the people in the room who can actually do something about it. And I would want it to be very much a two-way process. So rather than somebody saying, this is what your data's telling you, it's about, this is what the data's telling you. But let's set that in context of your own organisation. Let's have a better understanding of which are the areas of low-hanging, the easy areas to fix. What are the barriers to stopping you do that? And ensuring that when you have those kind of genuine activation workshops, that you come out with tangible things on the back of it that genuinely the organisation can do something about. But it's also about ensuring when you've worked out what are the vital few, of ensuring you've got measures in place to assess those. And it's not easy, but it frustrates me enormously when I see so many occasions when the insight isn't driving action. Because frankly, if it doesn't, it's a complete waste of time. It's a complete waste of spend. And I think some of my colleagues who will be speaking throughout the day will be talking about how they've driven action from insight. But it's not an easy thing. It's about getting the stats right. It's about getting the activation right. It's about getting the tracking of it afterwards in place. But thank you, it's a great question.
Muchas gracias. ¿Alguien más tiene una última pregunta?
Well, I need coffee, even if you don't. So I would love to have a coffee. I'll be outside, if that's okay with you.